Okay guys, I'm finally doing it. A sequel to the first video I made over 2 months ago that I'm sure most of you forgot about at this point, but better late than never, I guess. Pokemon Soul Silver was one of the first Pokemon games that I've ever played, and even though nowadays it's not my favorite, the memories I had as a child running around with my favorite Pokemon and the 10 million attempts it took to defeat Red's extremely overleveled team are something I still have to this day. But despite all of the hours I put into this game, I just can't for the life of me remember half of these damn Pokemon. But maybe that's just me. How could anybody forget the absolute hall of fame that is Johto's Pokedex? I mean, we're talking about fan favorites like Stantler, Gramble, Octillery, and my personal favorite, Unknown. But the point is, Gen 2 didn't have the best lineup of new Pokemon, and it's kind of the same when it comes to how viable they are. While some Pokemon have gotten tons of upgrades to help with this, or are just complete outliers in general, many of them have been left to rot with the rest of Pokemon. Personally, I think they deserve a little bit better, which is why we'll be looking at some of the worst Gen 2 Pokemon and giving them the buffs that they deserve to at least just do anything at this point. Now, the first Pokemon I'd like to discuss is Sunflora. I don't know if it's just me, but the only time I ever see people talk about Sunflora is to bring up how bad it is, which, hey, they got a point. But honestly, I still think Sunflora has a few good things going for it. Its coverage is surprisingly good, with a ton of moves like Earth Power, Sludge Bomb, and Dazzling Gleam. And its abilities are also not bad either. Having both Chlorophyll and Solar Power makes it very interesting when it comes to how it could be played under the sun. And that's all fun and games until you look at everything else. Mainly these stats because they're awful, and it's honestly what kills this Pokemon. Hitting hard with Solar Power doesn't matter that much when you run at a pace of 2 miles an hour, and Chlorophyll only makes that 4 miles an hour. Also, the combination of being a pure grass type and having a low defense stat makes it really weak defensively. It's really not hard to take this thing out, you just gotta punch it in the face. So what do we need for Sunflora to actually blossom and become something? My bad for that pun, I don't know what I was thinking. We could first start by looking at its stats, and honestly, I might only increase 2 of them, being defense and special attack. We're not going with speed since I think Sunflora could thrive better as a strong Solar Power user in Trick Room. This is only because there's absolutely no competition for that role whatsoever compared to the 800 other grass types with Chlorophyll. I'm going with 30 points in defense and about 15 in special attack to round it off with a respectable 120. Now, to help it a little bit more, I was thinking it might be worth giving it a secondary typing, and I decided to go with Fairy on this one. It already gets Dazzling Gleam, so it would have a stab spread move off rip, and it's the closest type I could think of that works aesthetically outside of fire, which, yeah, I don't want to think about this thing launching heat waves. I personally believe that if Sunflora had these changes, it could at least be useful on Trick Room Sun teams as a partner for Torkoal, since hey, we all love Torkoal in this house, and Sunflora too, I guess. Now, the next Pokemon I want to talk about is Magcargo. The more I look at this thing, the more I realize that it's actually kind of funny, and I'm sad that everyone just forgot about it. Maybe it would have helped if it was something you could actually use and not discard after realizing that it was a pile of nothing. Magcargo might actually be even worse than Sunflora because I at least had a few good things to say about her. But between the terrible stats and that god-awful typing, Magcargo just struggles to do almost anything in battle. Besides maybe setting up hazards, I guess. They did buff this thing already in Gen 7, giving it an extra 10 points in base HP and special attack, and at some point it also got Shell Smash, but come on. Even with +2 speed, what is this thing outspeeding? It's a snail for a reason. But if there's one thing I do like about Magcargo, it's that its utility is so good. You have moves like the Screens, Will-O-Wisp, Yawn, Recover, and Clear Smog, and all of these moves can be pretty useful in VGC. So once again, we're looking over there. For the longest while, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I almost gave up. But I thought of something that could maybe work, although it's pretty different from what I usually do in these videos. I think we could all agree that this thing needs an evolution. There's just no working around that. Look, if Bisharp could get one, although it definitely did not need it, so can the ugly lava snail that was left to die in Gen 2. But designing an entirely new Pokemon from scratch is way too much work, so we're just gonna call this thing Joe-Cargo and throw it to the side. We only need the new evolution for one thing, and that's so Magcargo can make use of the Eviolite item to multiply both of its defenses by 1.5 times. And with that, all it really wants now is a better ability. We could go with some options like Solid Rock or Shell Armor here to stay in theme, but I prefer Solid Rock to at least help a little bit with the water and ground issue. We basically just made Magcargo into a hard to remove disruptor that spams utility moves while doing nothing too much offensively. Kinda similar to what Umbreon does, except without Snarl and Foul Play. It would still probably not be the best Pokemon, but it would have some sort of niche, which is a lot better than what it does currently. Now, before we move on, if you made it this far into the video and enjoyed it, it would mean a lot if you chose to subscribe. To those who did already, thank you so much for helping the channel reach 1K. And I swear I'll come up with something to give back. Maybe like a giveaway or something, I don't know. know. And to those who aren't subbed, well, you can help me hit 10k instead. It would mean just as much, if not more. Anyways, Ledian is a Pokemon I already talked about on this channel. And while in retrospect, I'm not happy with what I did, I'm pretty sure nobody wants to hear me constantly yapping about the same Pokemon, even though it's essentially the poster boy of bad Johto Pokemon. So instead, we'll talk about its distant cousin in Ariados. There are a ton of cool concepts with Ariados that are so close to being something decent, but just aren't really hitting. My favorite one is the whole sniper cross poison combo it has. Like, that just sounds awesome until you remember that it's Ariados. Also, apparently, Ariados got an entirely new signature move in Scarlet and Violet that I didn't even know about until now, called Toxic Threads, which poisons the target and lowers their speed by 1 stat. Oh, post-editing here, but apparently it's been a thing for 8 years now and I'm just stupid. It never came up for me, so I didn't know about it. Now, Ariados is held back, mainly by god-awful stats, but that's what's to be expected from a bug-type Pokemon. So maybe we could start by moving them around a little bit. For everything Ariados wants to do, which is the cross-poison stuff, along with setting up sticky webs, it definitely wants more speed than anything else right now. I was thinking we should min-max a little bit by taking 10 points from both defenses and 30 points from special attack and dumping it all into speed. While base 90 isn't the fastest, I still think that's fine because there's one more thing I need to talk about here. When I first read about Toxic Threads, I thought that the poisonous threads were hazards that both poisoned and lowered the speed of whatever switched in. But I was wrong. They just decided to give one of the worst Pokemon in the game a really bad signature move, which is why we'll be making it what I initially thought it was, meaning a form of hazards. It would essentially just be both sticky webs and toxic spikes if it was one move. And while that would be really powerful, the fact that only Ariados can get the move is a pretty fair drawback, since outside of that, Ariados would still be pretty bad. Also, with these hazards up, assuming that Ariados isn't dead of course, it can help it be useful later on by outspeeding and hitting crit cross poisons on slowed Pokemon, or getting Fell Stinger knockouts on Pokemon with low HP thanks to poison. Overall, I think this would be a fun gimmick and would give Ariados a chance to be looked into. Now we're finally at the last Pokemon. I did this with the Fixing Gen 1 video with Mewtwo, and I wanted to do the same with a Gen 2 legendary as well. So we're going with Lugia. Just like Mewtwo, Lugia is a Pokemon that finds itself in the lower ranks of formats that allow restricted legendaries. Despite all of this, there's still a lot going for him, which, you know, it should be the case considering it's restricted for a reason. Having multi-skill as an ability helps it a ton with its already insane levels of bulk, and having recovered to constantly bring it back up to full HP makes it a really hard to remove Pokemon. This allows it to make use of its most popular moves and Calm Mind along with a strong signature move in Aeroblast. Except there's one problem with this. For a legendary, he hits like a puppy. They dumped so much points into bulk that they made it so Greedent hits harder than this thing, which is kinda funny because I just soloed that new Rayquaza raid with one. Also, similarly with Mewtwo, Psychic as a restricted typing is heavily contested by powerful Pokemon such as the Calyrexes, all the Gen 7 legendaries, and also these guys if we even care. Now with Lugia, the fixes are a bit more obvious. So we'll get that stuff out of the way by making some small tweaks to his stats. And by that, I mean just taking 20 points from special defense and putting it into special attack. That's probably all Lugia needs to be useful, but just doing that would be kinda lame and a big waste of an entire segment of this video. So we're gonna do what they should have done with this Pokemon since Generation 2, and just make it a water type already. Now I've seen the reasoning for why it is a psychic type in the first place, and I do like it a lot. You could pause the video to read it yourself, but the TLDR is that psychic back then was a symbol of powerful Pokemon, and Ho-Oh and Lugia were imagined to represent the sun and the moon, kinda like yin and yang. Obviously this was 18 years before we got actual sun and moon, and then they just made Lugia a flying type because it has wings. And I get it, but at this point you could play bingo with the amount of Pokemon with wings that aren't a flying type. Some of them even came in Gen 2. This might just be my opinion, and maybe it's a stupid one, but I think Lugia would have been awesome as a water and psychic type. There is just as much of an argument for water as there is for flying. Lugia is supposed to be the guardian of the sea, and every time I see this thing, it's somewhere around water. Sure, you'll lose out on Aeroblast, but you could now get Stab on your Hydro Pumps, which is another powerful move that could miss. The only big problem with this is the competition it would face from Kyogre as a water type, but thanks to how different they are by design, they could both fill very different roles in the metagame. Kyogre focuses more on raw damage output, while Lugia is much more slower paced and harder to remove from the field. Overall though, the changes are small, but I think they would make Lugia a lot better and a little bit more fun to use. Anyways, that's how I would go about fixing some of the worst Gen 2 Pokemon. Obviously, I couldn't cover all of them or else this video would be like 2 hours long. I mean, Johto is full of them, but if you have your own ideas, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys for the next next one. In fact, YouTube says that you'll like this next video, so let me know if they're right.